Welcome everyone to another edition of Drunk Agile. It's one of those editions where we're drinking the same stuff, we're wearing the same stuff. Nish is in the exact same position, so
Let's make sure she is.
and she is. Um, so let's not waste too much time on that. Let's get right to the topic, because I think this is something that we'll probably have to spend several episodes on. We really just want to introduce the topic tonight, and the topic that we're going to be talking about is the idea of the voice of the customer versus the voice of the process. Prateek, what do those things mean, and why do we care?
Yeah, let me take one and you take the other.
Okay. Okay.
The voice of the process essentially is an idea of how your system is performing. Your process is taking X amount of time to produce something of value, or your process is producing things that are of Y level of quality, whatever that is. That is the voice of the process. How long it takes us to get something out there, how our process performs. That is the voice of the process. Um, the exact measurements of those things. That is what the voice of the process. On the other hand, voice of the customer.
If there was one word that I could swap for voice of the customer to hopefully maybe help people understand really what voice of the customer is, it would be specification. If you think of voice of the customer as a specification, the customer is coming to you and saying, this is specifying to you, this is what I want. A great example of this, because most people think this would be a voice of the voice of the process thing, but it's really a voice of the customer. And of course, my favorite target is Scrum. If you take a look at the Scrum guide, Scrum says that you have to, if you want to do Scrum, that you have to produce a done increment that meets a goal at least once every 30 days, so 30 days or less. That's a specification. That's all well and good. As my mother used to say, it's good to want things. People in hell want ice water. And that's really rather the point is, just because you got a customer coming to you with a specification of how your process should operate does not mean that you, given your context, can design a process to meet that specification. And so this is why it's so crucial to take a look at what's the voice of the customer and what's the voice of the process, as Prateek just defined it. Hey, what's the true capability of our process based on certain data and certain rules of interpreting that data? And are those two things in alignment? Because if they're not, that gives us an idea of some actions that we can take. So I don't know, Prateek, I don't know if is there something you want to say about that, or do you want to head down the action?
No. I'm going to push you a little bit on this because go. I totally agree with you, but I want to make sure people understand what you're saying.
Fine. Go for
it. So Dan, what you're saying is, when I have a 2-week sprint, that when I'm running a Scrum team and I have a 2-week sprint, that is the voice of the customer, not the voice of the process. The 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think we got into this. If anybody wants to go and rewatch our time boxes or arbitrary episode, I don't forget what the title of that is, but yes, I mean, why do most Scrum teams do 2-week sprints? Well, most Scrum teams do 2-week sprints because most Scrum teams do 2-week sprints. It is legitimately completely arbitrary. There's rarely, at least, I don't know if you've ever seen it. This is interesting. I guess I've never really thought about it this way. I have never been to a company where I've seen a legitimate business need to have a 2-week time box around work. Now, there might be legitimate business needs to get work done less than 2 weeks, but to have a specified time box, I've never, ever seen a legitimate business need for that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, and I'm not saying this is something you should not, but I'm just saying, in terms of, if you look at it from the voice of the customer, a legitimate business need for that. So yes, if somebody comes along and tells you, hey, we have to have a 2-week sprint, that sounds processy. That sounds like that's the voice of the process, but it's not. It's a specification. It's an arbitrary specification. It's somebody asking you, this is what I want. Design me something that gives me this. Whether you can get that process is a different thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I was going there was it's what's interesting about that is all of a sudden you've added a customer. You've added an ever-present customer that's giving you an extra specification for what they want. So you are beholden not just to your actual customers, but you're also beholden now to this customer called the Scrum framework method, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah. So should we go to action, or should we save that for another?
Yeah. No, I think we need to. I mean, at least for this episode, we want to introduce these concepts. We want to talk about the voice of the customer. Really, actually, is what is it that the customer wants? And as Dan said, it's the specification of what they want. What do they want? When do they want it? The voice of your process is what can you produce and when can you produce it? And the next step of this, which most companies realize, but they don't really state it this way, is that those two things are almost always mismatched. Those two things are almost always, the voice of the customer is almost always different from the voice of the process.
Yeah.
And yeah, go for it.
And so at a very, very high level, I'll talk about what actions to take when you find out that those things are out of alignment, because honestly, to discover the voice of your process, that's potentially an involved thing. Likewise, to discover the true voice of your customer, that's potentially an involved thing. So we're going to have to gloss over those, but I don't want to gloss over them, because that requires some some serious brain power, some serious investment of
Investigation, even
whatever.
Yeah.
So let's say we have discovered we do know the voice of our process, and we do know the voice of our customer, and those things are misaligned. The actions are pretty obvious, and most of you can probably guess. There's essentially 4 things that we can do. We can change the voice of the customer. We can change the voice of the process. We can do both of those things, or we can do neither of those things, right? I mean, and just kind of leave it. Just say, oh well, we're always just going to be unhappy, miserable. Those are the 4 things. Hopefully, though, and this is really, I hope, the point of maybe this episode, those actions are rooted in what I just said, a true understanding of what the voice of your customer is and what the voice of your process is. It's not based on just some arbitrary thing somewhere, like just assuming the voice of the customer is right. Scrum says we have to have this, 30 days or less. That's what Scrum says. That's arbitrary. That's the voice of the customer. And don't think that you're failing because you are doing because you can't do that. Likewise, don't feel like you're succeeding because you can do it. If you deliver every 30 days, your legitimate business need might be every 2 days. So anyway, those how to take all of those actions, I think should be maybe separate episodes. Were you going to jump in? Were you going to say something?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's probably something to hit another time. But yeah, it's a lot of Agile, and especially when people start talking about maturity in Agile, is centered around doing this practice or that practice. Really, what we are trying to do is help teams achieve business goals, have organizations actually achieve business goals, and the business goal that you want to achieve is match those two voices. Can we match those two voices? That the only maturity model you need is how close are those voices. If you keep getting those close, if you get closer and closer, you're doing better, and that's literally the point of all of this. Discovering those two and then matching them as much as we can.
And just to be clear, so so I'm not always picking on Scrum, although that's one of my favorite pastimes. The flow metrics, the flow metrics themselves can be weaponized in much the same way. Prateek and I worked for a director. I don't remember the exact data, but I think a team's cycle time was like 12 days or less, 85% of the time. And the director came in and just arbitrarily said, okay, in the next month or in the next 2 months or whatever, I want it 10 days or less. This director just came in and like just again arbitrarily said, reduce your cycle time by 20% or whatever, and wasn't backed up with any legitimate business need, wasn't backed up with any understanding of, is the process even capable of being able to do that? Just by fiat said, reduce your cycle time by 20%. That's just as bad as saying, hey, release every 2 weeks, you know. Anyway, so I guess that's a lot of fodder for us for maybe some upcoming stuff. If there are specific things about what we've talked about in this episode that you do want us to do the deeper dive on, please do let us know. Leave us a comment. We read all of our comments, and we try to respond to most of them, as we can. So Prateek, maybe I guess just any final thing to wrap us up.
Oh yeah, if you want to understand more about this, read Dan's latest book.
Yeah, so Actionable Agile I forgot to plug your book in the last episode. So
I just want to make you feel bad about it. That's all. But yeah, Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability Volume 2, definitely Dan gets into a lot of this stuff, and also how to really use this stuff, understand stuff, and of course in the upcoming episodes we'll dive deeper into these.
Just as a postscript to the last episode, then. Anytime we talk about dependency management, anytime we talk about scaling flow, Prateek's book is out there, and it's called Scaling Simplified.
Yeah. That's what it was called yesterday. I'm sure it's still called that.
Okay. I don't know. As you can tell, I've read it and memorized every word. But please check that, and maybe maybe we'll talk a little bit more about our books in a
yeah.
So if you want to hear that, let us know. For everybody who's watching, for Nisha, who hasn't moved.
I think her back left paw was a little bit forward. Yeah.
We go into the tape to see. So for Nisha, for Prateek, my name's Dan. Thanks everybody for watching, and see you in the next episode. Bye everybody.